I used to be surprised. I'm no longer surprised when I'm in Lakewood and I meet somebody who says, I love listening to Sherman All Daf. Who do you listen to? And they'll tell me, oh, I listen to Rabbi Rosner, Rabbi Leibowitz, or someone else who's a Muslim Chavayu. And then I'll be in Teaneck and they'll tell me, my favorite Maggid Shir is the Lakewood Daf Yomi Maggid Shir. So it's being able to see how Torah is a unifier, Torah is a ma'ached.
So with Shavuos coming up, we're doing some extra focus here on Shtark Tank on matters of Talmud Torah, and it's a great honor to have Rav Moshe Shwed, who's responsible for a lot of Torah being learned all over the world at this very moment and every single day, 6 days a week. So Rav Moshe, thank you so much for joining us and welcome.
My pleasure. It's actually 7 days a week, even though we are using technology. But as soon as Shabbos is over, they're on the apps.
Great. So let's start with a little bit of background. Tell us about where you're from, what your background was, and sort of the quick life story up until the All Daf came into existence.
Here we go. I grew up in Monsey, New York. Went to high school and post-high school Beis Medrash in Long Beach, New York, Masifta of Long Beach. Those who aren't familiar with the map and geography, Long Beach is a island right near the 5 towns. And from there, I spent 5.5 years learning in Eretz Yisrael, in Yeshivas Brisk, with getting married in between. Around 2 years single, another 3.5 years married. Moved back to the States, joined Beis Medrash Gavoa in Lakewood, New Jersey. Spent quite a few years learning there in Kollel. Did my last couple of years, while I was still in BMG in the morning, I was running a second Seder program at a Beis Medrash in Monsey, New York. And then in 2018, August 2018, I took on this incredible job that I'm grateful for till today. When I took it on, I didn't know what it was or what it would be of running these platforms.
So what was the very earliest sparks? How did this come about? What were the early origins?
So the early origins of this job specifically is that the OU always had an online Torah site, OU Torah. It was small. Rabbi Moshe Elephant, who runs kashrus at the OU, was saying an online Daf Yomi share besides for his regular share that he says every morning, still says every morning in Bar Park near his home. That point, somebody at the OU had gotten a grant, a significant gift to build out the Torah platform, to add to it. And Rabbi Elephant, who's actually my father-in-law, we'll talk about in a second. I think I say I have the job despite him being my father-in-law, as you'll soon understand, because he called me. I'm looking for somebody who may be able to do something to bring this idea to fruition. So I said to him, maybe I could. He says, you probably could, just I can't hire you because of nepotism at the OU. To make a long story short, I joked that they had to change the constitution at the OU, and they hired me. When I was hired, it was 2018, the end of 2018. This was around 15 months before the upcoming Siyum HaShas of the 13th cycle, which took place in January 2020. So this is around 15 months out. And the goal was, let's figure out what we could do, what we could build, and have it ready to launch by the Siyum HaShas. That's what happened.
Wow. And so just tell us briefly, there are other apps out there that have Torah content and shiurim. So what makes All Daf special and unique?
So that's an excellent question. I would think the primary factor is that we are Yomi-focused. That means you open up any one of our apps. We focus on content that's consistent, that rolls over from day to day, and the apps are all set up that way. That's number one. Number two, we're focused on highly curated content. That means we're only going to put on content that we feel is high quality and something that a user base will really gain from having it on our platform in the way we provide it. And most of these Yomis, let's talk about Daf Yomi for a second, is the actual Daf Yomi share. But what we've worked to create is supplemental content around the Daf. So you'll have the opportunity not just to learn the Daf, but to learn Jewish history that comes from the Daf. Or you'll be able to have a short preview, a short review on every Daf, a short piece of halacha on every Daf, various modes of review on every Daf. And even in the Daf Yomis themselves, there'll be different style Daf Yomis that we've presented. And that's essentially what separates us from the other Torah apps platforms that are out there.
That's very interesting. And before you had this job, just thinking about the relationship of Torah and technology, you mentioned the wonderful yeshiva's Brisk, which is obviously a prestigious yeshiva. But I doubt there are guys in the Beis Medrash there sitting there with their laptops and their correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think so. I don't think there are any computers anywhere in that building. So it tells a little bit more about your relationship with technology beforehand, and was it something that you were using and thinking about before this opportunity came up?
So you're right. I don't think, at least when I was there almost 20 years ago, there were no people sitting in the Beis Medrash with their laptops. However, even probably in Brisk and in BMG, where I live here in Lakewood, many people sit with their computers and are using computers to assist their learning. It certainly wasn't the reason why I took this job wasn't because I had a fascination with technology and I felt like this is my calling to be involved with technology. However, I'm somebody who's passionate about learning myself personally. I'm passionate about giving other people the opportunity to learn. And I'm sure this is what we're going to talk about more people who, especially who have left the Coastlay Beis Medrash, connect them to Torah. And as we joked somewhat before we got on the call, there are people who are using technology, with their flip phones to call all kinds of phone programs. And that's the sort of technology also, right? That more than they were doing 50 years ago or even 30 years ago when All Daf became a thing of technology. So, even though technology has evolved and now we're on apps and smartphones and AI and all that type of stuff, right? I think we've seen the world, from some communities less, some communities more, using technology to help themselves and help the communities grow in Torah learning.
That's very interesting. And so, given the fact that you weren't particularly interested in this topic, what was it that caused you to say, this is really a job for me? What was it about yourself and your personality that was just like a cool job, and it sort of attracted your eye? Because the Torah technology piece was not something that was like driving you hard beforehand.
So I think what fascinated me was the opportunity to be able to bring high quality Torah content that may be, let's talk about a Daf Yomi share. There probably were various Daf Yomi shiurim that were in different places around the internet. But somebody who didn't have the skill set, the time, the drive to be able to search and find the share that works for him, either wasn't learning because he didn't have the time and the drive to find it, right? Or even if he was learning, he wasn't learning at the level that he could be learning. So being given the opportunity to bring all these various shiurim and then adding supplemental content to take either people who weren't learning at all or learning very little to bring them to learning, or people that were already learning and give them an opportunity to grow in their learning, that was something that I found very, very interesting. And when I was primarily brought on to be the creator of the content. When I say creator, not necessarily that I'm the one creating and making the content yesh and myself, but do some of that, but also find what's out there and bring it all together from the content perspective, and much less from a technology perspective. Obviously, as the project has gone on, even from the beginning, I've gotten much more involved in what's needed to allow the technology or allow the user to engage with technology better. But that wasn't the primary focus of why Schwed was brought on, because he's like some guru in apps and websites. I joke around that when I took the job, I probably couldn't tell you what UX UI actually stood for. Obviously, I learned it very quickly, and here we are.
So, if I understand correctly, you basically saw potential to build a sort of Beis Medrash with tremendous scale and tremendous potential for harbatzas Torah and Klal Yisrael, and you're like, I want to jump on that. And if I got that correctly, is that also sort of something that drives your father-in-law, who's been giving this online Daf Yomi shir, even though he comes from maybe the communities that are less gung ho about the internet? Is that the approach here?
Absolutely. You'd ask my father-in-law. Yes, he certainly has been using the internet to spread Torah. Probably from the beginning with the OU. I think they actually, where are we, 13 cycle, 12 cycle? He probably started saying the Daf Yomi share for the OU online at the beginning of the 12th cycle. We're in the 14th cycle now. So that's going back, over 20 years.
Right. Actually, it's funny. I remember when I was in high school, so we're now going back maybe 15 years or so. I had Gemara Bachinas, and I would actually chazer with Rabbi Elephant's Daf Yomi shir because it was very clear. It was gave you the sort of the basics, and it was online, easily accessible at a pretty solid website going back to the standards of those days. So certainly, I have a lot of our cars for that as well.
If you have time for a fascinating story regarding Rabbi Elephant's early online. So the story starts very recently where a fellow, let's call him Jeff, reaches out to me, sends me an email. He would love to speak. Can we speak? He said, sure. But before he says, we actually meet, he sends me a link to an article. He says, please read this article before we speak. Just get to know a little bit about me. So he sends me the article. I open it up, and it's an article about a fellow from Marietta, Georgia, at the Jerusalem Marathon in 2020, where him and his running partner are making a Siyum HaShas because they ran through Shas. Now, what's the backstory? The backstory is, which he filled me in a lot of details when I met him. We're talking about a person here. I don't know what his level of religious observance is involved. That could be the president of a conservative shul. So, I'm not talking about somebody. This he told me himself. He didn't have a Jewish education past fifth grade in a conservative day school, Solomon Schechter, where he grew up. And this is somebody who told me that in 2008 he found Rabbi Elephant on podcasts, and he listened to the three Bavas, Bava Kama, Bava Metzia, Bava Basra. Then he stopped. And then in 2013, he had a friend who also lived in Marietta, Georgia. They decided they're both running. They were runners, marathon runners, as a hobby on the side. Decided let's learn the daf, and they both used various online shiurim that were available then, and made a Siyum HaShas in January 2020. And he reached out to me. This is probably in 22, 23 maybe, and he says, ever since All Daf launched, I've been learning daily daf yomi on All Daf, and then we launched All Parsha. He says I've been learning daily Parsha on All Parsha. And when All Mishnah launched, I've been learning daily Mishnah on All Mishnah. And at that point, we posted on All Parsha a Yomi calendar for Nach Yomi, and it was a new cycle starting then. And he says, I'm starting to do Nach Yomi as well, and I'm reaching out because I want to share my thanks and Akar Satov, and he wanted to make a donation also to the platform, and I've become very close to him since then. I actually went to meet him a few months ago, and we had a nice conversation. But one of the things, and he's showing me what else he's doing. He's learning on the Halacha app, Daily Kitzer. It's incredible. It's somebody who had no yeshiva background. I don't know even what his level of religious observance is. Certainly not living in a regular mainstream community. The amount of Torah that this person is learning with technology is incredible. But when we were talking, so one of the last, pieces of the conversation went as follows. When I asked him, I said, Jeff, what about all this learning? How does it affect you? In what way? Like, where does it hit you? What does it do to you? And he says to me, the truth is, we live in crazy times. We live in challenging times. Learning Torah calms me. It settles me. It makes me feel grounded. So, like, this is somebody who didn't go to yeshivas and hear, right, the Sichas Moser and the Moser Shmuz from the Mashgiach or Rosh Yeshiva telling him, how Torah is something which is new and it's something which is so important. This is somebody who actually is feeling the effects of what Torah is supposed to do to a person, right? It makes a person, it changes their life, and it makes them feel different. Sometimes we have to pay attention to it and be conscious of it, and we can't always feel it, but that's something which was incredible to me.
Wow, that's beautiful, and I'm sure I hope that you're cataloging all these. I'm sure you have a lot of other amazing All Daf and All Torah feedback stories. That's really beautiful. And so when you talk about the Torah being grounding and having an online app that allows people all over to be grounded, so I'm thinking now to the fact that you launched this during the Siyum HaShas, which was a very beautiful and wonderful event, and obviously a new product has buzz and excitement around it, and then the pandemic hit and completely changed our lives, at least for definitely forever, but in a very drastic way for a few solid months. So what was that like to have all this online infrastructure all set up and ready to go when people weren't able to access their normal in-person shiurim?
It's interesting because, like you mentioned, we planned all this technology without any plans of a pandemic, just for people who were doing their regular thing. And then as the pandemic hit, like you said, when schools closed down and there weren't opportunities, for people to actually learn with their regular schedules and their regular chavrusas, and people had more time to learn, right? So it really goes back to what we were saying before. People who didn't have as much time to learn had more time to learn. People who weren't learning at all, they found themselves connecting to Torah, and it was what else can we say besides, is Hashem preparing the refuah before the Makkah?
So when we think about Torah and technology, obviously technology has a whole host of issues and discussions around it, but specifically with regards to learning and technology, how do you think about that? Do you think that it's lechatchila that someone should try to avoid using their phone and their devices for learning? Is it b'diavad? Is there some other way that you think about this when people talk to you about the way that this app and other similar technologies play into their relationship to Talmud Torah?
So I don't think that there's an answer to this, because I think every single person has to approach this differently, whether it depends culturally where they are, but even more on a personal level, right? Every person has to really understand, what they need to help them grow and become closer to Torah learning. That means in every aspect of life, right? There's always going to be a lechatchila and a b'diavad, right? And sometimes the b'diavad for that person is a lechatchila. So, in other words, in the general way it's ranked in the world, this could be lechatchila, but for you, right, it's b'diavad, and vice versa. For somebody else, something could be b'diavad, but for you, that's lechatchila. So if you want to talk Torah learning, the most purest level, of course, if we were able, and if every person I think is able to sit and learn in the Beis Medrash the whole day, right? Like Rav Shimon ben Yochai, and doesn't have to work and doesn't have any worries, anything to think about, right? But that's not how Hashem created and put most of the people in this world. And we have many things going on and many things that we have to do. So finding ways that you're able to use your time properly, set aside time to focus on Torah study. If you're able to get a chavrusa and learn in person, of course, I don't think anybody will tell you that it's better to learn online. I don't think anyone will tell you it's better to learn on a telephone, right? Than to sit with the chavrusa face to face and learn, and with a chabura of people, right? With the way Torah was given, right? Bechabura, with a kol Torah, the way the ones who went through the yeshiva system know what a Beis Medrash looks like. But with that all being said, right, a person has to really be honest with themselves, how they could learn. Maybe some people don't need it every single day. Me personally, as much as I run all these apps, I don't listen to I'm not a committed daily app user for this year. I'm on the app, checking things out. But as an app user, I have a chavrusa I learned Daf Yomi with. For Daf Yomi on the app, sometimes I'm in the car. I want to hear something extra. I want to hear how a certain Maggid said the Gemara. So I don't think there's one clear cut cookie cutter answer for everybody. I also think it's important, again, I don't know if this is what you're driving at, but technology has been adopted differently and at different stages in different communities in Klal Yisrael, right? It may look different in Lakewood than it does in Williamsburg, and may look different in Williamsburg and in Lakewood than it does in Teaneck. And each community, I think, I don't want to use the word struggles with, but deals with the challenges of technology at various levels. It could be one community is dealing with at what age the kid should have access to the smartphone, whether it's in 6th grade or in 9th grade. In other communities, it could be at what age do we give the kid the cell phone. But everyone deals with it. I think I would say most of the world recognizes technology is here to stay. Technology is a tool that could be used well, and it's just a different approach of how you approach it. I think that most people listening to this podcast fully understand are taking advantage of technology to grow their Torah learning.
And some people, even in the secular world, have sort of criticized or pointed out that the internet is very conducive to very sort of addictive, short form, shallow types of content. I'm not so sure I agree with that. I mean, it's clear that certain platforms, for example, podcasts, which is one of my favorite, or a site like Substack, are built in a way, even though they're online, to create a deeper engagement, a more focused, long form, nuanced type of experience. So how do you think about that balance when you're sort of designing these apps and creating a space, which, I don't know, maybe some people need a 3-second TikTok clip of Daf Yomi while they're waiting for the dentist, but in general, I think both agree that Torah is something very deep and needs focus as much as possible. So how do you grapple with that?
Is actually, for those who may be familiar with, he has different names, different online names. On Twitter, I think he calls himself Oakwood Bacher. I think on YouTube, he's like Greenspan's Meiser or something, but he had this parody of the Rabbi Gulper Daf Yomi share. It was a 1-second share in a gulp. Rabbi Gulper was the Maggid share. But again, I don't think I think every person really has to know themselves and know what they need. And knowing yourself also helps when you have friends that can be honest with you, when you have rabbeim that can be honest with you, and know what your strengths are, where your strengths are. For one person, it could be he only could handle short form content. If that's all he can handle, great. For some people, they should strive and can handle long form content. But the short form content is when they're biking or when they're in their downtime, right? Or you talk about a melus batorah. What does the melus batorah mean? It means something different for everybody, right? So there's a melus batorah, and there are times when I could be learning Torah, even when I'm on vacation, right? Even when I'm on the couch relaxing, right? The biggest Gedolah Yisrael, they ever take a break from thinking and learning, and their minds were totally occupied. Even they had different levels of, right? The third week of the winter's man, right? Second Seder wasn't the same as the third week of Ben Azmanim for the same Gadol B'Yisrael, right? Every person has that. There are different times and different times and different stages in life also, right? How are you going to be able to learn? I think it's staying grounded, staying focused, making, I don't mean this is a scary word, a cheshbon hanefesh. Where am I? Am I growing? Where was I 6 months ago? Where do I want to be in another 6 months? And taking all those details into account. So to answer your question, when we put out content, we don't like guide it in a way. We want you to be learning this way. So we're only going to be creating content in this way. Obviously, when you create content, you create it, for the greatest common denominator, you know, in a certain sense. Obviously you're going to create content which might be for a small population, but in general, that's usually how things work. But I think we're not here to guide and teach people, what and how they should be consuming content.
That's very interesting because I guess, again, there is some correlation between the media and the message and sort of the forms and the length and certain things about the product design, maybe sort of nudging people to focus a little more and not, offering them different distractions or ways to ping off. Is that something that you guys try to do to even just like in the continuum between focused and distracted that you guys try to design in a certain way?
I wouldn't say consciously. My personal philosophy is I feel like the less you try to tell people how to do things, the more they'll focus on what you're actually giving them, right? So if you're giving them a half an hour shear, right, without telling them or even intimating to them that this is really the better way to do it, then maybe they'll do it, right? But we also have to have the shear, which is 16 minutes, right? Because either that person only has 16 minutes to do the shear. There are people who use it to prepare. There are people who use it to review. So I don't think it's in our planning like how we want people to engage. What we want is people should be moving up in their engagement in Torah content. That's really the goal. Identify where people could use help and assistance in the Torah learning and get to those people and see them grow and become more engaged in their Torah learning. More engaged means something different for every person. But I think that's really the focus.
Got it. So there's an approach, a very important approach of Malan Bakodesh in Moridin. And is that something that you like track in your data as far as like how the users are doing and seeing their user journey, their user lifespan, all of these terms that you probably know a lot better than I do? Is that something that you guys are actively involved in?
Answer is not enough. Not enough because like every nonprofit startup, we're growing and that's something we probably could be more involved in and maybe beneficial to people. So I'd say we're not enough, but we should be and could be doing it more and helping people more.
Got it. And on that point, it's an interesting way of classifying where you are. You're a growing entity in a difficult space, meaning to build a really great product, a technology product, takes a lot of work. And I think maybe some of the lay people may underestimate. Like you go into Spotify, you go into YouTube, it seems so easy and so smooth and so fast and so convenient. And there's so much work and so many resources that are poured in the other end that the user can have such an easy experience. Is that something that people take for granted? How do you guys make sure that you're providing a product that really works seamlessly and represents the values of Torah and is not going to have people saying, well, why bother with this buggy thing? I have Spotify and YouTube that has that Yomi share and that work a lot better.
That point is absolutely correct. Staying on top of technology, I could say dealing with Android apps is a lot more difficult than iPhones because the iOS system is one system and it's the same It doesn't matter what kind of iOS phone you have, it's more or less the same. Androids, there are all different types of operating systems in each phone. It's something which is much more difficult to deal with. No, I don't think people recognize and understand what it takes. There are a lot of different options out there. People sometimes get used to something, they're getting something consistently for free, and they may expect things and ask for things in ways that may be like puzzling to me. But I really try to take a hands back approach and, try to understand or not judge people, for how they expect things and what they want and what they're asking for. I think if you're focused that this is not Moshe Shwed or anyone that works with me, this is Hashem's Torah, and I have the opportunity and the zchus to be able to bring tens of thousands of hours of Hashem's Torah down to this world, which we all know. The Ramchal writes in Derech Hashem, right? I don't recall offhand the exact language that he uses, but along the lines of, without paraphrasing, the greatest and most essential connection that a person has to Hashem is through Talmud Torah, through Limud Torah. So being able to literally bring the Torah down and connect people up is something which I look at as a tremendous opportunity. But of course, it has its challenges. It has its daily challenges. Like we started with, it's 7 days a week. It could be Chol Hamoed. It could be Erev Yom Kippur. People want their content, especially if they get used to it. Now, do you want to know if we went away, could somebody? This really goes back to the original question. There are people, right, who are maybe using the platform, and if we disappeared, right, they'll have to acclimate and figure out, how to learn. Let's use the Mesivta Gemara, right, as an example, right? The Mesivta Gemara, for all those who aren't familiar with it, is an incredible, incredible work. That the back of the Gemara has, you could learn a sugya literally from the back of the Gemara, right? So now there are people, if the Mesivta Gemara wasn't around, that have to take more time and they're motivated and they can learn a sugya without the Mesivta Gemara. Mesivta may make it easier for them, maybe a crutch for them, which maybe they shouldn't use, but that's not our discussion. But if you moved it away, they would do it themselves. But I think for the majority of the people, when you remove the easy access that they have to Torah learning, they wouldn't access it, right? So that's what we have to stay focused on. We're giving people easy access, and I think today's generation, most people need, especially ones who are not grounded and not focused, spending hours a day in the Beis Medrash, need an easy way to connect the Torah and learn.
That's very interesting. And one of the things that you alluded to is the financial model and the these big platforms have come under some very intense criticism, and the fact that we love the free content comes at a price. And I think one person put it very sharply. He says, if everything is free, then you're the product and you're being sold and your attention and your data and your advertising potential. So how do you overcome that when people, on the one hand, they want it to be free, on the other hand, they want the product to be great, and they don't want to be bombarded with advertisements, having their data stolen and all that stuff? So what gives?
So go back to what you started with in this segment of like startup. We started with seed money from donors who gave enormous, significant amounts of money to get these products started. As with most startups, you eventually have to shift and evolve into a stable company and business, which has to work on revenue, right? Not just the startup seed money. So part of that is, and something that I've taken on, is direct fundraising, right? Engaging with users who use it. And it's education. Some of them just have to be educated, right? To run this platform cost X because this is what's involved in running the platform. And most of them, once they understand, they realize the significance that it's having on their own lives, right? And they don't look at themselves like, like another institution that's coming to them and asking them for funds. They want to contribute and they're happy to contribute. So I think it's a lot of education. People have to understand. I think it's with most anyone who's involved in the nonprofit space. I think your success, and it's not only nonprofit, but when you talk about nonprofit, if you're able to, I'll use the word sell, but it's not really selling. You're able to invite people to understand why your product is a product that they need. They're going to buy in, and buy in can mean buy in the for-profit world, and buy in can be in the nonprofit world. Whatever their buy-in is, whether it's because they themselves are growing, feels important to help others grow in Torah learning. That's the way you got to do it.
Got it. So when you're continuing to tweak these apps, improve them, rolling out new ones, as you mentioned. I guess we just clarify that started with All Daf, and now there's also All Parsha and All Halacha and All Nach. If I'm missing any current ones, you'll let me know. But so as you're going through this process, what are some of the features, innovations, the chidushim that you've sort of brought to the product that you're sort of most proud of?
I think personally, what I'm most proud of is being able to take subjects that may not be learned that much, right, and make them available to be learned in a way that they weren't being learned before, and they're more accessible to the world. Let's take Mishnah Yomi, for example. Mishnah Yomi wasn't
I think
something
I missed
that
that one.
most people, yeah, so we have All Daf, All Parsha, All Mishnah, and All Halacha, which was launched recently. So the All Mishnah platform was launched when the last Mishnah Yomi cycle started. I would give a shout out to Art Scroll because they were the ones who approached us that they plan on sort of reviving the Mishnah Yomi cycle, and they've constantly kept it up with giving our free Mishnayos and lots of advertising. But we took the opportunity to work with them, and join them in a certain sense of creating our own app. So people who are in tune and involved in the Mishnah Yomi cycle should be able to learn. I should really just mention now, for those who are going to be listening to this podcast, within the next couple of days of when we record this, May 15th, Maseches Avos starts Mishnah Yomi. Now, the season that we're in after Pesach, summer season, some people learn Pirkei Avos. Most people learn Pirkei Avos. They may glance at a Mishnah or two in the parak of the week. Maybe their rabbi says a shir, or there's a women's gathering in someone's backyard, right, where they have a speaker talk about something interesting that's in that week's parak. But now you have an opportunity with the Mishnah Yomi cycle with thousands of people across the globe to learn. Just go through the Masechta in 7 weeks and cover all the Mishnayos. Right? You can listen to Rabbi Leibowitz and Rabbi Resnick and some of the other Magidei Shir that we have on the app. So if you haven't downloaded the app, and I'll get to this at the end of the podcast also, you go to the app stores and download all the apps. And I'm sure Yaakov will have the links to our link tree in his show notes. But that's one example. Yushalmi something, Yushalmi Yomi. How many people do you know that are learning Yushalmi Yomi? Well, now there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people that are learning Yushalmi Yomi. That was also something we did with Art Scroll. When Art Scroll finished translating the Yushalmi, they started a new Yushalmi Yomi cycle, and we launched Shiurim with them. And we have Rabbi Rosner and Rabbi Resnick and a couple of the Magidei Shir who are saying Shiurim and Yushalmi. Now, who's Yushalmi for? There are all types of people learning Yerushalmi. I'm not saying if you're learning Daf Yomi now, you should start learning Yerushalmi if you don't have time for it. But it's something to keep in mind. It's an important part of Torah, a very interesting part of Torah, and we've made it accessible to the world. And I get into different features, but I think in my mind, bringing Torah, real Torah, to the world with ease of access, high quality curated content is something that I'm most proud of.
Right. Okay. It's very beautiful. And our mutual friend I'll give him a shout out, Shalom Schwartz, a big time Yerushalmi power listener, and Rabbi Rosner. Obviously, the energy that he brings to that project.
And your father-in-law, Simi Zimbalist, was very instrumental, first of all, in everything that Rabbi Rosner does in the community there. But we made a Siyum Yushalmi recently, that was in Yerushalayim, but we made a Siyum Bavli November 2023. It was like a month after September. It's like September 11th, a month after October 7th. And it was at the time when they were calling up soldiers. It was like, are they going into Gaza? About to go into Gaza. And we had Rabbi Rosner and many others who were there for a Siyum. And this just brings out, what Torah could do and how Torah literally is a grounds people, right? But if, you could even find it online and share Rabbi Rosner's speech at that Siyum, talking to people, after it was a month after October 7th, the traumatized country and world, and probably dozens of people in the community and at the event whose children were fighting. Oh, and he's talking about what Limud Torah does and how important it is to make it a part of your life. And how you have to have the soldiers actually fighting, to protect Am Yisrael, but the ones who aren't actually on the ground, how important their Limud Torah is, and equally as important to be able to bring down whatever Yeshua and Hatzal that we need.
Right. Very beautiful. And from your perspective, looking at how this project has progressed, whether it's looking at some of the data that you see on the back end or just anecdotally, what have been some of the biggest surprises into how the apps are used, or what some of the implications of some of the products that you've put out there that you weren't expecting to see?
I really wasn't expecting, and this really gets back to what we were talking about before, people who, if I know them as people, I wouldn't think that they're going online to learn. It's interesting, if I meet somebody who hasn't heard of it, the first thing I say is, hey, you haven't heard of it because you don't learn Torah online. You still learn Torah from the books. The amount of people who are book learners, let's call them, people are learning from the books, right? Who are using technology, using these platforms, whether it is to review a Daf Yomi share, whether it's to learn Yerushalmi, whether it's to hear Rabbi Hartman, right, the Magia, famous Magia of the Maharal, 50-volume blue Maharal, say a Dvar Torah on the Maharal every week, right? Whether it's hearing someone say someone who's a specialist, in Sfas Emes, give over a piece in Sfas Emes, right? Being able to take the things that you may not get from sitting at your Gemara, right? Whether it's because I'm not sitting at the Sfas Emes, someone learns Sfas Emes, I'm not a Maharal person, so let me hear Maharal from someone who's an expert on Maharal. So I think that's been something that's been very interesting to me. I think what's even more interesting to me is, so I live in Lakewood, New Jersey. Okay, for those, I would say most people know, Lakewood is a right-wing town, right? It's a town who the people that they know are people who went through the curated yeshiva system. Teaneck, New Jersey, right? Maybe a town, not maybe, is a town, right? Where most of the Rabbanim there and the Rabbeim went to YU and that yeshiva system. I used to be surprised. I'm no longer surprised when I'm in Lakewood and I meet somebody who says, I love listening to Sherman All Daf. Who do you listen to? And they'll tell me, oh, I listen to Rabbi Rosner, Rabbi Leibowitz, or someone else who's a Musmach of YU. And then I'll be in Teaneck and they'll tell me, my favorite Maggid Shir is the Lakewood Daf Yomi Maggid Shir. So it's being able to see how Torah is a unifier, Torah is a ma'ached. That Torah was given on Har Sinai, ki ish echad b'lev echad. It wasn't just like a nice, cute, feel-good thing. It was a prerequisite for Torah learning. The Torah had to be given. And the way Klal Yisrael is going to grow in Torah is going to be when they learn ki ish echad b'lev echad. And just to add one more thing to this piece is that we're during the days of Sfira, right? That those who have a minig, and I think it's brought down already in Svarim, right, to go through one of the Memches Dvarim, Shatorah Niknas Behen. There are 48 ways for a person to acquire Torah, and they learn one of the 48 Kinyanim every single day. 49th day is meant, to review. And I think the Vilna Gaon discusses, I think he learns it in a pasuk in Mishlei. We don't have time to get into the whole discussion now, but essentially the punchline is that not every person has the characteristics of each one of the Memches Kinyanim. One of them is Yishuv, one of them is Simcha, one of them is Ahava. They're all different ones. No, so Alum Chavera, they're all different ones, which every person may not have the characteristic that's required to excel in that Kinyan. You know what he says? He says it doesn't mean that every single person is going to have every single Kinyan. When we have Klal Yisrael who are learning B'chabura, learning together, they each could tap in to each other's characteristics. So when we focus and when we learn, right, and we say the bracha in the morning, right, we're davening not just for ourselves. We don't ask Hashem, give me, Torah should be sweet to me. When we daven for Torah and we daven for success in Torah, we're davening for Klal Yisrael. It's really, really important that when you're talking and asking Hashem, that you should have the same chelkeinu b'sorah secha. Also, we're always talking about the plural, thinking about Klal Yisrael. We need Klal Yisrael together to have this chelik in Torah, and that's how we're successful in Limud Torah.
That's amazing. So it's very cool, and I think it's very interesting to me to think about how a lot of these conversations echo sort of broader conversations about the internet. And one of the great hopes and dreams about the internet was that it would be able to sort of break down barriers and transcend some of like the normal lines. And then some of the pushback has been, well, Lamaisa, there are a lot of these echo chambers, and really you're just getting your own sort of content curated for you. So it really is beautiful that you've been able to tap into that higher potential of creating a Beis Medrash that's not just big and scalable and amazing, but also unifying, especially in these times, is very, very important. And I appreciate that a lot. So in your position as someone who has been sort of steeped in this world, creating platforms for Talmud Torah, a lot of which is being used by Balabatim and people who are in the workforce. People are very busy. Obviously, there are others who use it as well, but just focusing on our mutual shared target audience for a moment. So, what have you noticed to be some of the most important characteristics of someone who's successful in being a Bnei Torah, being connected to their learning, even though they're very busy with work and community and family and all of the other things?
So what I see is people who are able to create some sort of responsibility for themselves, right? That they want to grow in learning, and growing could be that I haven't been doing Daf Yomi and I'm doing Daf Yomi. And it could be if someone's doing Daf Yomi, right? I'm personally very fond, something I've passion for is learning the Ion, right? Learning, taking it slow and really understanding the questions and the answers of the Gemara. People sometimes think that Ion has to be that, you ended up, learning Reb Chaim and Sefer, and that's how you're learning Ion. No, the start of learning Ion is on the page of the Gemara, right? There's a Gemara, and then there's something called Rashi, which most Magidei share don't even learn. And when I was taught from fifth grade, right, Gemara gets learned with Rashi. I think it's important, just as a side piece, to not lose focus and lose track of that. And I'm assuming most of the audience that we're talking to are people that have gone through the yeshiva system. And your next step is learning Taisvis, right? You could pick one Taisvis on the Amud, right? And see a question and an answer. Many times, by the way, it's gonna be something you're thinking about yourself. You're like, oh wow, I was thinking about that also. And I see that Tyson asked the question. So I think it's really staying focused on growing, moving the needle for your own learning. I think, but something which could be even more powerful is there are so many people out there who maybe in the perfect world, right? They could have been Rabbanim, they could have been Magidei Shir, they could have been saying the Shir themselves. There are so many people who have the potential if they take a step back and try to find an opportunity to learn with one person, two people, three people, maybe be the guy, right, who after, right, the 6:30 minyan in shul, which probably ends at 7:02, to create a Mishnah Yomi group, right, that, and now you leave shul at 7:05. Maybe make a daily Kitzer group, right, maybe make a daily Mishnah Brewer group. And it doesn't have to be you saying this year every day. It doesn't even require the rabbi to be involved on a daily basis. We all know how busy Rabbanim are, and many of them don't have the time and the capabilities with everything else going on to also say that cheer for your minyan after davening. There are so many people, and I think people that take it on, they'll feel themselves growing and connected to learning. And I think another important piece, right? People today, the world's very small, and people are busy and they're running all over the place, many of them for good things, right? But sometimes, again, this gets into like, when you're not always thinking about what your priorities are, right? You get schlepped, we're going on vacation, we're going to be gone for 2 weeks. We were just away 2 weeks ago, we're going away again. I'm not here judging, what type of vacations people take. I'm not even here for that. But I'm saying that if someone feels a responsibility to something he's doing where he is, right, he's going to be thinking twice in a good way. I'm not running away and going away for another 2 weeks because I was just gone. People need me in shul. I got to be there. I got to be there, right, to keep the chabura going. Even if I'm not saying this year, right, I'm the guy maybe who's making sure the coffee is ready in the morning for the chabura. So I think it keeps you grounded. You'll feel growth yourself. And most of all, you'll be helping other people grow. And I think the most important thing is people that have families, when your family sees that you are somebody who's committed to Torah study, it creates a different respect that your family has for you, right? When your family sees that there are certain things that nothing's gonna budge until I do the daf. Have to be available. I got to daven every morning at 6:20 because not just because I have to get to work at 7:30, because there's a shir right after davening or there's a shir before davening. I'm a primary part, of that shir. So I think these are all things to keep in mind, especially for us working people out of the Beis Medrash, right, to keep ourselves grounded and growing in Torah.
That's really amazing, and so much, so many important points and nuggets that you threw in there. And I would just maybe clarify and point out that the internet also provides a lot of great opportunity for that. Even though if you're serious mentor, you don't need to have the most viral share, but in your town, you might not find 20 people who want a certain style of Sfas Emes Chabura, but on the internet, you could definitely find 20 or 30 people and build yourself a niche there. also the commitment and the drive. I was zocheh to see Rabbi Rosner giving Daf Yomi shiurim on family vacations over years and years and years, finding a quiet room, finding a quiet corner with his laptop and his mic. So it's really something that I've seen how it can help Gedolim and Ketanim alike to stay motivated.
And you know what? Like you said, you mentioned the internet, today with WhatsApp groups and everything like that. You could be vulnerable with your friend. Say, listen, let's call your friend Joe. Joe, I want to grow in my learning. I need accountability, right? Either could you be my accountability partner? I want to start for the next 2 weeks, make sure I learn the daf every day. That's just for your own personal learning. You can tell Joe, I want to feel some kind of shibud and be able to give over, right? I'm not here to force anybody to listen to my whatever I want to do, right? But let's just say, pick an example, right? You want to learn the Ramban's till Sheni every week, right? So it's very easy, right? Maybe instead of sitting in your study or wherever you are, and open up your Chumash and reading the Ramban's, take out your phone, right? Put on voice memos and start learning and start saying it. You'll see yourself how well you could do. And then maybe you'll ask your friend, start sharing this. I'm not sharing this because I need anyone to listen to me because I think I'm this special Maggid share. It's just something that I do myself. And I think perhaps, some of my friends may benefit from it.
That's very beautiful. This has been so interesting. Let's go to our lightning round. 3 short questions, 3 hopefully short answers. We're now in the summer. We have nice long Shabbos afternoons. What does Rav Moshe Shwed like to do on his long Shabbos afternoons?
Moshe Shwed loves to take a nap. I take a nap, couple hours sleep, but then I like to sit down sometimes in my house. I have a nice little study and either catching up, reviewing the daf. I'm very fond of, and this gets back to what I was doing before, find a sugya, find something that you're thinking about that you want to work on. It could be you heard an interesting shaila, right? This gets back to keeping yourself grounded. I heard an interesting shaila, right? So you either go on ChatGPT and ask them what they thought. You can do that. You can do that also. That's fun, right? But then open up the Sfarim, go back to your days in yeshiva of how you used to do things. It's finding those times when your phone is not going to buzz and you're not going to be disturbed, and that's what I like. I'm obviously learning with my boys, catching up on their on their week. That's what I like to do on Shabbos afternoon.
Amazing. And we were talking a lot about the approach and the hashkafa and the motivation around Talmud Torah and staying grounded. Do you have a particular sefer which you find most inspirational or most relevant when it comes to developing that relationship, that grounded approach to your Avodas Hashem and your learning in particular?
I'm really all over the place because I like Sfarim and I always find different things. Obviously, I grew up. I went to yeshiva where there was yeshiva was a Talmud of a Baron Cutler, and I learned to BMG. So for those who've never tasted Mishnah Baron, it's worth tasting, especially the way he puts down Talmud Torah and a life of Torah. I'll give you a warning. It's dense, right? So it's not light reading, and don't read it thinking that you have to understand every line that he says there. But there are certain pieces there that really give somebody an understanding. You don't have to have grown up in his ashkafa, in his system, but just seeing the way he puts down a life of Torah is certainly worth checking out. But again, it's not light reading, but there are lots of lines there that I think are very, very powerful. The way he learns up Midrashim and Chazal. So that's something that's interesting. I'll throw out one more, which is just an interesting I've come across recently. A set of svarim called Sharei Hazmanim. It's from a Rav Dessler, who's I think a Mashkiach in Panovich. It must be a grandson of the Rav Dessler. He really has beautiful essays on all the different times of the year, which many people find like becoming connected. This is all part of being grounded as a Jew, being connected to the times of the year. And those are Svarim, which I think would make very, very interesting.
Okay, and if you were forced to leave your job today and choose any job in the world, maybe something that you dreamed about or as a kid or have some itch to go into, what would that be?
Whatever it would be something that I'd become rich very quickly and be able to spend a lot of time learning. I don't have any specific passion. I'm actually fascinated now with the way AI is developing. So whatever job I would be doing, it would be with seeing how AI could supplement it. I like dealing with people. So it could be any type of sales job, whether it's selling real estate or maybe selling trinkets on the street. So it'll probably be something in sales and something that gives me time to spend learning.
Okay, Rav Moshe Shwed, thank you so much for joining us, and we really appreciate learning all these insights and the behind the scenes going on behind one of the great Batei Medrash of our day, the All Torah platforms that so many of us use and enjoy and grow from and get inspired by. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Wonderful. Thank you for the opportunity.
Shkaya.